In this section, we're going to touch on the key concepts of media ethics, keeping in mind, though, that we do here at Ohio State offer media law and ethics as a combined course I really encourage you to take. It is a requirement of the journalism major, and I look forward to seeing you in there. If you are interested in getting a head start on that, you can check out the course materials on the other iTunes U course that we have, which is called Media Law and Ethics. So I encourage you to check that out, or I'll see you in 3404. So when we think about ethics, we have to understand that it's a code of behavior, and that behavior and what that code is depends on the environment in which you live. So, there are other parts of the world where there's behavior that we would consider to be completely unreasonable here as Americans, which is perfectly reasonable there, and the same applies here. So what we have to think about as we practice journalism is what's ethical for the considerations of what we're working within. But these are some of the core concepts that we have. We're going to be truthful when we tell our stories. We're going to be accurate, and we're going to report things as objectively as we possibly can. So representing both sides of the issue without bias, that reflects our impartiality to one particular topic. We're going to be fair to both sides, and ultimately we're going to be accountable to the public that we serve. Part of the structure that we work under is that we will limit harm to the people that we report on and about. And that means that we have ethical standards by which we often don't name minor children who are involved in crimes or are the victim of crimes. We don't name a lot of crime victim names. Certainly people who are victims of sexual assault, it's fairly well known that most publications don't publish their names. That's not to say that all do not, and there's been a debate on this issue. And you can check out some of the articles on that iTunes U course where we talk about some of the changes that have taken place in terms of that policy. And really we're looking that there's no need to publish things that aren't really materially related to whatever the story is that you're working on. So, if you are working on a particular story and you come across something that's really wild and crazy about one of your sources that doesn't have anything to do with the story, and you're only putting it in just to kind of, embellish it or to get people reading salaciously, you really need to reconsider why you're doing that. We talk about fairness and accuracy. We're as accurate as we possibly can be. We recognize, though, that truth changes, and police will tell you witnesses are often unreliable, and sometimes you'll get information that does not pan out to be completely accurate. We have to be pursuing information as fairly and accurately as possible. We need to acknowledge when we make mistakes. We need to make sure that we get confirmation of information. So this is one of those core concepts of what separates us from people who are not trained in journalism, is this absolute quest to be as fair and accurate as possible. To that end, we don't cheat, we don't steal, we don't lie. So we don't commit plagiarism, we don't fabricate things. There's absolutely no room for this. Now, that's not to say it's never happened. Very famous names, Stephen Glass, Jason Blair, but we need to make sure that we attribute as fully and accurately as we can, that we do all of our own original reporting, and that we absolutely fight that urge to, copy something off the web and just paste it into our story. I know that it's easy, and it's wrong. This idea of attribution, as we talked about before, we attribute all direct quotes. Anything that you didn't witness, you have to attribute. And that means if you see someone on the ground and it appears that their car's turned over next to them and the window's pushed out and you're certain that this car overturned and that person flew out of the windshield, if you didn't see it, you can't report it. Get someone who knows to report it. Get a police officer, get a witness, whatever it's going to take to have someone that has authority and has credibility to be reporting on that topic. Now, you also have to keep in mind, you don't have to attribute things that are common knowledge. So we know that on September 11th, the World Trade Centers fell. We don't need to have someone attributed saying that. We know that that's a fact. Advertising pressure is something that you may certainly be faced with at some point in your career. We know that newspapers are struggling. We know that advertising dollars are hard to come by. The temptation is there to make deals with advertisers. They'll advertise if you'll do a story on them. That kind of goes against our prime directive. So it's even though you're going to get those people that say, I'm going to pull my ad if you run this story, or I'm going to not advertise if you don't run this story, or whatever, we operate independently from advertising, and we have to maintain that standard. Conflict of interest is something that we've talked about in here and that we really need to make a strong effort to avoid even the illusion of impropriety. So although you may want to interview your cousin and you feel like you can represent yourself completely fairly, represent him or her completely fairly, if there's the perception out in the world that that was inappropriate or that your story was compromised, that illusion of impropriety is indeed impropriety. So we don't do stories on people related to or companies that we work for. We don't do special favors. If you have any question or doubt, just ask your editor. Your editor's role is to protect you from harm, in addition to making sure that all your information is accurate and protecting the readers from harm. So, in this case, let your editor be your guide if you have any questions at all. The idea of working undercover on a story sounds very exciting, and it is very exciting, but it's not something that we do very often, and it's a great distinction between being undercover, working on a story, and actually deceiving people by not identifying yourself or lying about who you are. So there has to be a really compelling reason not to identify yourself for the most part. You're going to want to tell people that you're a reporter and that you're working on a story, and to deal with them above board and hope that they'll do the same with you. Now, photographs have presented a pretty significant challenge in terms of sensitivity for our readers and viewers. There's been a historical kind of precedent where we do not run dead bodies in communities where those people lived. So that's something that we constantly are kind of struggling against as to how do we balance what the right is to know versus the standards of a family or a community. And these things will come into context with, certainly with some of the war pictures that we've seen. This is an example here of 3 Columbus soldiers were killed in this incident. This is the photo that ran in the paper, and there was some debate about that, and there were a lot of photos that didn't run in this particular case. We're looking to make sure that we understand why we're running the photos, what our goal is for them. When we're running stories and we're identifying things that might be uncomfortable for a community, what's our purpose and our goal? And if that is to advance knowledge in some way, then we certainly have a strong basis for doing such. But if it's just to, and I'm putting in quotes, sell papers, we have to reconsider why we might want to do it in this particular way. It sounds like the greatest thing ever, right? You become a reporter and you get to go to things for free, and people give you stuff for free, and you get to eat for free, and you really don't get to do those things for the most part. So people may be compelled to give you gifts. They may offer you things to do stories. They may want to give you things after you've done a story. Don't accept them. Most news agencies have some sort of policy that limits you to a $5 limit or a $25 limit, but we really have to think long and hard. Again, that perception of impropriety, and if someone thinks that you were paid off to do a story, or that you did the story because you were going to get some reward in the end, that is not going anywhere to foster your credibility. So the exception, of course, is with reviews. We often get tickets to plays or books or even food in restaurants if you're doing a story on a restaurant, not a review per se. So, recognize again this is a policy of your publication, and make sure that you speak with your editor about what that policy is. We do corrections. When we make a mistake, we acknowledge it publicly. We make sure that we get out the proper information, and that includes tweeting, it includes articles, it includes web stories. So make sure that you are open for corrections and that you acknowledge them, and recognize that this is a long-standing policy within the framework of journalism. Now, I've given you here some from the Society for Professional Journalists. These are some of the core ethical standards they have. They've really established the mainstream journalistic ethical code, and it's on their website, and I've put a link to that on the iTunes U course. But here's some of the big ones: that we're going to seek truth and report, we're going to minimize harm, as I mentioned, that we're going to act independently so that we are free of obligation, that we're accountable to the readers, the listeners, the viewers, people that we serve. I really encourage you to take media law and ethics, either to enroll at your earliest convenience in the course here at Ohio State, or to check it out on iTunes. I provided a link for that in this iTunes U course. But understanding the law and the ethics and how they've shaped journalism and how they serve journalism and how they're evolving in journalism is only going to make you a better reporter.